Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bitcoin News Show right here on the World Crypto Network. Thanks again, guys, so much for joining us on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. As usual, of course, it's been a super busy week in crypto, so we, of course, have an amazing show for you guys. Really excited to bring you the topics this week. Lots of stuff to talk about, guys. Let's go ahead and get right into your quick bits, right into the quick news here. Pretty interesting stuff going on this week. We have the original pizza guy, the original guy who bought pizzas all those years ago for 10,000 coins, Mr. Laszlo. I can't pronounce his last name, but again, guys, all the links, of course, will be right here in the show notes. Mr. Laszlo does it again with Bitcoin Lightning Network. So he actually bought pizzas with Lightning Network. You guys got to check that link out. Really awesome stuff. Then Trezor is now updating their software because, Google is phasing out their Chrome apps. So they're going to have a new way to interface with your Trezor. So check that out. You don't have to worry about anything too much, guys. It's a rollout process. It's going to go out over months. So no need to worry, but definitely make sure you check that link out so you guys are prepared. And Robinhood launched their cryptocurrency trading platform this week. Pretty interesting stuff. Not to every single state, but a few different states. And they, again, had over 1 million people in the queue for that. So that should be interesting to watch this week as it plays out. And then I just completed an interview with Mr. Peter Kallos, who is a Hungarian Bitcoin podcaster, guys. So definitely check that out. Really cool to be able to bring Bitcoin to even people who don't speak English, right? So we want to bring Bitcoin and crypto to as many people as possible. So this is an effort to do that. So he actually interviewed me and then added he interviewed me and then added the subtitles on top of that for the Hungarian. So very cool stuff, guys. Check that out. And then last but not least, I just wanted to address a little bit of funny business out there, guys. There's some kind of crazy stuff happening. And I just wanted everybody to be aware that there are a few things that are in motion right now. Some kind of just wanted to make sure everybody's aware of this. So basically, the co-creator of Bitcoin.org put out a POW change post. The mempool is starting to fill up a little bit, and the hash rate of Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Unlimited started to go up. And then one more thing, the Bitcoin ABC nodes started to go up. So there's some few things in motion right now, some funny business. We're going to find out to see how it plays. And of course, we will keep you guys updated right here on the World Crypto Network. So without further ado, let's introduce our amazing guest today, guys. We have returning again, Mr. Francis Pulio of Cadillacsy.com. Francis, how you doing?
Hi, Vortex. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yes, man. We're very proud to have you back again. You are our go-to authority on mining over there in Canada and Quebec. There's lots of exciting stuff coming down there. So thanks so much, Francis. Let's introduce Mr. J.W. Weatherman, returning again, guys. A Bitcoin security researcher and co-founder of BTCthreats.com. J.W., how you doing?
Hey, guys. Happy to be here.
Yes, sir. Really glad to have you back. We always love to hear your insights into Bitcoin. A lot of crazy stuff going on out there right now, JW. So we need you, man. We need the security researchers out there checking stuff out for us.
Thanks, man. Happy to be here.
You bet, you bet. And then finally, guys, we got our special guest joining us all the way from Japan, Mr. Jonathan Underwood, Chief Bitcoin Officer at BitBank Exchange in Tokyo, Japan. Jonathan, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing wonderful. A little bit early, but anything for the World Crypto Network.
Thank you so much, man. Yeah, we know it's early over there. We did push the show, guys, 1 hour later than normal so that we could try to accommodate Jonathan because he's already getting up early as it is, much earlier than I have ever gotten up probably in my life. So thanks so much, Jonathan, for joining us. All right, guys. Well, then let's go ahead and get right into it. There's a whole lot of topics, whole lot of stuff to talk about. So let's go right into the first topic here. With more countries out there creating state-sponsored crypto, such as Venezuela, Iran, Turkey, and more, and now even Putin, the man of Russia, saying that Russia can't be left behind in the blockchain space. With all these state-sponsored cryptos, will they eventually take over? And do they pose any threat to the traditional crypto? So, Jonathan, let me ask you: Do they pose any threat? I mean, what is your opinions on all of these state-sponsored cryptos? Do you think they can eventually take over?
Well, first thing, coming from Japan, our government over here has been a lot more responsive to crypto at an earlier stage than other countries. But as far as like a company or a country-sponsored crypto, there hasn't really been much movement here in Japan. But from the news that I hear, from different countries around the world is you're hearing that state-sponsored crypto is coming towards kind of like those areas where the kind of the currency of the country itself is not so stable. Whereas in our country, like in Japan, as well as in the U.S., the Japanese yen and the U.S. dollar are some of the most stable currencies in the world currently. So I don't think that, as far as Japan is concerned, that we're at that point yet. But I do think that what you're going to see moving forward is a lot more countries who feel like their currencies are threatened by currencies like Bitcoin, like Ethereum, and other currencies like that. I think you're going to see more and more countries moving forward with country-sponsored cryptos to kind of as a last-ditch effort. I don't think they're going to try to do a one-on-one with their own currency, because you don't want to stick it on a sinking ship. So I think what they're going to try to do is make a new currency with the virtual currencies, and then try to use that as like a buoy that everyone can jump ship to and be like, oh yeah, our old currency that was sucking for the last couple of years, yeah, no one uses that anymore. It's just we're all going to use this new virtual currency that all of the investors around the world bought the ICO for, and now the price is pumped up. So now our official government currency is worth a whole bunch, because of everyone around the world could instantly buy it in the ICO. So now the price is up, and we can use that as leverage on the world stage. So I think you're going to see that. Yeah.
Let me just quickly answer then. What do you think of the Petro then, as it stands right now? Do you think that actually can help Venezuela, or what do you think?
In the Venezuela instance specifically, I can't really say whether or not that'll help them in the long run. But I do think that as far as like economically, I think it's kind of just their Hail Mary is kind of what they're doing. So I don't know. It's a big gamble, I think. But they've really kind of lost. They don't really have much to lose anymore. So I do think that it's either going to do pretty well for them, or it's not gonna make them that much worse off. I don't think so. Yeah.
So it's pretty binary output. There's a lot of cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin, that seem to have this binary outcome. Whether it's going to either succeed and take over the world, or it's just going to crumble and fail. And yeah, I mean, Japan is pretty, leading the game over there. They're making Bitcoin legal tender, so that is very interesting stuff. We have seen Japan continue to embrace Bitcoin, and so maybe they will. Maybe they'll make Bitcoin their national currency one day. That would be kind of nice. Would you see? I don't think you see that happening, right, Jonathan? Anytime soon.
Yeah. Just to clarify, a lot of reporting has kind of been a little bit wishy-washy around the whole legal tender, quote unquote, thing. Just so that there's two classifications due to the new law. The first one is the original, like currency, which is basically like Japanese yen. And then there's foreign currency, which is like the US dollar and the ruble, or anything besides the Japanese yen. And then now there's a new class called virtual currency. And this new class basically says, okay, we're going to recognize it, just as we recognize the US dollar, but we're not going to put it in the same group as the US dollar, because we realize that putting the same regulations on it as a fiat currency from another country is probably not the best idea. So right now it's classified as a virtual currency, so you can't pay your taxes in it. But you can't pay your taxes in the US dollar anyways. So right now they have it set off in a separate area, just so that when they regulate it, or if they change a regulation for foreign currencies, or if they change a regulation for the Japanese yen, that you're not trying to put a square peg in a round hole with virtual currencies. I think they are very forward thinking on trying to make sure that the regulation framework is accommodating to all of the new virtual currencies, no matter how difficult that may be.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense. So, Jonathan, one last quick question for you before we move on to the other guests here. What does a chief Bitcoin officer do at BitBank? Because that sounds like about the coolest job that anybody who likes Bitcoin could ever hope to achieve. So, please, just briefly tell us what you do over there as chief Bitcoin officer.
Yeah, okay. So just to kind of give you a really short, TLDR version of BitBank's history, we started in 2014. And in 2014, it was right after the Mt. Gox collapse, and there was a big vacuum, not only in Japan but in the world stage. You know, Bitstamp was out there; they were doing a good job, but there was definitely a vacuum for exchanges. And at that time, I met the BitBank CEO, Noriyuki Hirose, and he was a good friend of mine. And we were, I was helping him kind of train engineers to help build, the services for BitBank at the time. And when he started BitBank, I wasn't technically one of the founding members, but I was kind of consulting them at the time. The motto of the company was bringing Bitcoin to the people, is what I would translate it as. And obviously at the time, really the only major player of the cryptocurrency space was Bitcoin. I mean, there was Namecoin and Litecoin had already been created, and Dogecoin I think was already around by then. But yeah, it was basically just, it was a one-horse show with Bitcoin. So when I came on as a full-time employee, they just kind of asked me, they were like, what do you want to be called? And I was just like, well, basically everything involving Bitcoin, or, like when SegWit debate was happening, like how are we going to implement SegWit? When are we going to implement it? What are the ramifications of implementing it? And anything around kind of Bitcoin, it just kind of, even though I was consulting at the time, it was like anything dealing with Bitcoin is just Jonathan makes all the final decisions and, do that stuff as far as the tech. So basically when I came on, they were like, what do you want to be called? And I was just like, how about Chief Bitcoin Officer? And they were like, it's fitting. That's good. Okay, great. And so now my card says Chief Bitcoin Officer. So basically I just, whenever there's something going on with Bitcoin, like when the hard fork happened with Bitcoin Cash, we were talking about internally whether or not we wanted to support it as a trading pair. And so we kind of talked, and I helped implement all of the different things. And I'm one of the maintainers for Bitcoin JS Lib. So we made a fork so that we could do SigHash fork ID, so that we could sign all of our cold storage and hot wallet transactions to get our users, being able to deposit and withdraw Bitcoin Cash. And also at the same time, after Bitcoin Cash, when all of the other, hard fork coins started coming out, I basically just put my foot down and I was just like, yeah, the only hard fork coin we're going to support is Bitcoin Cash, because, I just see the waterfall coming, and it's kind of hard to look through every single one and not find, it's like there might be a hard fork coin where a vulnerability in ECDSA is required to sign things or something, and that might compromise our whole cold wallet or something like that. So we just put our foot down. We were like, okay, hard fork coins, Bitcoin Cash is the only thing we're going to support. The end. Those kind of things are basically just me talking with our founders and everything, and then basically I'm the guy who kind of is the advocate for Bitcoin to BitBank, and then I also kind of implement the things that we do in Bitcoin with our exchange.
Very, very cool. So that's a lot of stuff there, but it seems like you are the go-to guy for Bitcoin there. And yeah, it's interesting about the fork support, because it seems a lot of other exchanges have made that kind of that pledge as well. And this is kind of something for decentralized exchanges. This is something that where decentralized exchanges might be able to get a leg up, because if they can, support this where there's no security issues, right? Because you own your private keys with these decentralized exchanges, then maybe that might be something that people would want to support. So that'd be interesting to see going forward in the future if there's going to be more and more of these Bitcoin forks supported on decentralized exchanges versus centralized exchanges, because they got to go somewhere. They can't just all be on Hanyecz or something, or one of these exchanges that they're just going to keep getting taken down. So let's go with JW next. JW, what is your comments on this so far, on these countries issuing these cryptocurrencies? Is this kind of the future? Is this what we're going to look at? Are they attempting to compete with Bitcoin, or are they just trying to dig themselves out of a hole?
Well, I've been saying for a while now, I think 2018 is going to be the year that nation states start really getting involved in this space. But I think we have to define a cryptocurrency, because if we're just talking about like a virtual dollar, all dollars are virtual, right? They're all in a database somewhere already. So that can't really be what we're talking about. And so I think that causes a lot of confusion. What I would say is a cryptocurrency would have to be something that's secure, and I know that's kind of a generic statement, but also has a limited supply, right? So something like the Petro, I wouldn't even consider that a cryptocurrency. And I think what's great about some of the stuff that's happening is even news outlets that aren't usually that great at due diligence, like Bloomberg, are having to start to make a distinction between something like the Petro and something like Bitcoin. And they're having to go, well, there's got to be a little bit more than just this generic cryptocurrency label. So overall, I'm really bullish on the development. I also think it's interesting, countries like Iran, Russia, and Turkey, these are all countries that they benefit least from US dollar domination in the world. And these are also all the countries that are talking about, should we do our own cryptocurrency? I don't think any of these guys are going to give up the goose that laid the golden egg, or that lays the golden egg, by cutting the throat of their central bank that prints currency and steals the money from all of steals the savings essentially from all of their citizens. But it does seem like they're putting a toe in the water, and it would be interesting if they start playing in this space. And eventually, I think it's inevitable that these guys are going to embrace Bitcoin, because they're going to realize that's the only way that they can really deal with the fact that the U.S. really dominates the currency markets, and that's sort of the U.S.'s brand of empire. And if they don't want to participate in that, and they don't want to submit to that, doing their own currency isn't really going to work. That's not going to get them free from it. Doing a cryptocurrency that's really just another digital currency isn't going to really work. So they're going to have to embrace something that's truly secure and truly decentralized. So overall, I think it's all good news, but I think what we're seeing right now is just sort of like the scam version of what I hope eventually becomes a full embrace of Bitcoin.
Yeah, because it does feel like they're basically coming out with scam coins, right? They're kind of circa 2012 or 2011 basically right now. These countries think that they can create these coins right out of, and because Bitcoin has value, they think that their coin might have value, and so they just start printing. And we know that doesn't work very well. Many coins have come and gone over the years, and it's just interesting that I wish I could sort of agree with you, JW, where they might eventually move to more decentralized tokens. But look, I don't think that they're ever going to do that, because that would just remove all of their power. It really would. And I don't think that they're going to voluntarily do that, because when you have these amazing coins like Bitcoin and stuff out there competing with them, they just have no chance. And so what's going to happen is they're going to force their citizens, right, to use these tokens, just like with Venezuela is forcing them to use the Petro. And so, it's like, I feel like they're going to create all these tokens. They're going to force their citizens to use it. Then the citizens are going to see that it fails, and then they're going to eventually come to Bitcoin. So, and then, it'll just kind of make the state issued cryptocurrencies kind of mostly just completely obsolete and irrelevant, right? I don't think will ever actually force somebody like Venezuela to create a good decentralized currency, right? They just have to kind of be replaced. What do you think about that, JW?
Yeah, there's no reason for them to create a good decentralized currency. They're either going to create scam coins so that they can continue to fleece their population, or they're going to embrace what's already there, right? There's no motivation for them to create a new version of Bitcoin. It already exists. So I do think that eventually that they're going to get there. And I don't think that, somebody like Russia that has a really functional central bank and they're able to print money and the inflation isn't totally rampant and they're able to steal all of that wealth. I don't see them just saying, that's better for humanity. Let's go ahead and embrace Bitcoin. But I do think that Well, for example, it's going to be sort of a process, right? But for example, if they did try to create sort of a scam cryptocurrency, right? They do the Petro thing. That opens up some really interesting doors that they don't really know how to deal with. For example, imagine how easy it would be to move from the crypto ruble, even though it's not really a cryptocurrency, it's just a decentralized asset. If it's based on like private keys and it's an irreversible transaction, you could immediately go into Bitcoin and immediately go out of Bitcoin. So there's no reason to have something like Tether. Bitcoin starts becoming really much more attractive as an immediate access sort of store of wealth and safe haven asset for these guys. And then if you do need to spend your crap token, which is the crypto ruble or whatever, it's easy to get back into that and then go buy a soda with it. So I think these guys they're kind of starting to slowly nibble on the poison pill, and every step that they take in the direction of a more functional money and a more secure money is moving them a little bit further down that slippery slope to Bitcoin, even if they don't know it.
Yeah, and it really does seem like they just have no way to compete, because how can a state-sponsored currency compete with something like a limited supply, something like that's completely decentralized, something that's created by the people, right? They're not going to ever attempt it. They're just going to try to do as best as they can, converting their fiat into a crypto-like thing. But but that's a good point though, JW, because that's what Adam Meister actually was saying too on his show the other day, is that one of the more positive things we can see from these state-sponsored cryptos coming out is the fact that you hopefully will be able to go in and out of them super simple with Bitcoin, right? If they are in fact cryptocurrencies or ERC tokens and such, right, that are put on a blockchain that we can just go in an exchange and just swipe right out for a real hard money like Bitcoin, then that would be something that I could see as a long-term positive thing for these things happening. But that's like one of the only very few things I could see other than just being examples of failure so that more people flock to Bitcoin. But yeah, let's go with Francis. Last but not least, Francis, we haven't heard from you yet. Quite curious to see what you think about these state-sponsored cryptos. I think Canada did something, with creating their own digital token at some point to do with crypto, but that never played out, I believe. But maybe you can go into a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, so regarding Canada, we had a project from the Royal Mint, I believe, or the central bank, I'm not sure, which is called Mintchip, which was a really interesting project, actually. I mean, I believe that started before Bitcoin, and it was kind of a way of using digital signatures to achieve some kind of cryptographic, like cash equivalent. It didn't end up being adopted, and it was sold off to a private company. But regarding, what we were discussing before, the Petro example is hard to kind of talk about nation states generally adopting or approaching cryptocurrency and like the Petro example at the same time, because it's such an aberrant and weird kind of example. So if you look at the Petro, I mean, you've got a lot of things going on there. You got a state-backed kind of crypto asset. You got a crypto asset which is supposedly backed by a commodity. Those two things separately aren't necessarily insane, but the way that the Petro have done it is complete disaster. You also are adding on top of that the traditional cheap ICO kind of pump and dump attitude and marketing and referral scheme, and just the general just cheap bullshit ICO. You can smell them a mile away. They're the ones that have the flashy ads on your Gmail account, and they're mixing all these things together. The crypto, the Petro itself, I have absolutely, obviously it's going to be a disaster for Venezuela. I have absolutely no, it's like an immense Rube Goldberg machine, which makes absolutely no sense. And what's worse is that it seems like I read this morning or yesterday that they're making it mandatory now to accept the Petro. I mean, this thing is ridiculous. At the last minute, it switched from Ethereum to NEM for some unknown reason. Some people posted analysis about how all the Petro was consolidated into one account. I mean, this stuff's crazy. However, if you look at governments more generally, I mean, okay, crypto, financial cryptography, those kind of new consensus algorithms like sidechains and stuff like that, that's technology which is available for governments that empowers them in their existing business model, which is the fiat, business model. Whether or not, fiat currency is a Ponzi and this whole thing is centralized and a tool to silently control the population and deflate away their wealth, etc., etc. They have these technologies that they can use to make those systems like actually more efficient in some ways, and for sure they're going to do it. But we're not, and I agree with JW, like this isn't a conversation about cryptocurrencies. Those terms and those definitions aren't like are being immensely confused. For example, in Canada, we have a network of banks that have a settlement institution in between them, which is like a nonprofit called Interac, and that allows us to withdraw money from one bank to another using an Interac card, and it acts like kind of as a settlement mechanism. So I mean, a state-backed fiat that can make sense is some kind of side chain when you have all those kind of banks that are already kind of issuing fiat currency-backed IOUs, and you can have that kind of thing, right? So there are ways that governments can make their fiat somehow a little bit better. But obviously, I agree with JW. Like they're not going to create decentralized cryptocurrencies. I mean that can't exist. You can't take the properties of Bitcoin that make Bitcoin good and just copy and paste them onto a new thing and just say it has value. That's not how it works. If you're using sidechains or colored coins, you're able to take some of the blockchains, like the Bitcoin blockchain or the Ethereum blockchain's properties, like the ability to create a censorship-resistant entry in the ledger and move a colored coin from one place to another, or the ability of having people to audit your coin in real time, or people can audit the supply of your coin using that. So these are some properties you can take from Bitcoin and just like kind of like apply them to some fiat IOU. But it's not going to help countries like Venezuela or Iran or Russia because these are not censorship resistant assets, right? These are assets that are just IOUs controlled by these guys. If they really want censorship resistance, then they need to have like decentralized proof of work. Right, and in order to have decentralized proof of work, there needs to be an incentive mechanism with a token in there that is inherently valuable. Well, not inherently valuable, but a token in there that's going to be valued, not as part of some kind of counterparty. It's just valued because it's useful in and of itself, which is stuff like Bitcoin. So you cannot have the properties of decentralization, censorship resistant, and all that kind of stuff with a state-backed crypto. You can only have that with a decentralized, proof of work-based crypto, and you can't conflate the two, obviously. And last word is that amongst one of the worst things that and you can do with an ICO, and like 99.9% of the ICOs do it, and the Petro did it, is why the heck would you have a utility token which is also used for financing? This is something that completely bewilders me. I absolutely don't see, like, if you're gonna have like some kind of utility payments token in your economy, why would you want its value to be based off some weird peg of all sorts of different commodities? This is like the least useful thing you can ever do. So yeah, that pretty much covers it for Petro being a total and obscene scam, which is, it's kind of, I can't believe I'm seeing this. Like, this is so unreal. Like if they weren't like killing people, like it would be hilarious. Now it's just like a complete dystopian nightmare where you have these dictators like at the same time having their political repression and people like hungry, and like at the other time like pumping ICO. It's like completely bewildering. But generally, as I'm kind of like JW in the sense that I'm pretty bullish that those nation states are going to start to use like some properties of Bitcoin and Ethereum for their own fiat-backed stuff. And ideally, at some point, if they really want to get the other properties of Bitcoin, they're going to stop saying, hey, we want the properties of Bitcoin without Bitcoin. And they're just going to start to think, okay, we want the properties of Bitcoin. Let's just use Bitcoin.
Yep, and that's what it feels like. I mean, remember, guys, the Bolivar was supposed to be based off of oil too, right? That was supposed to be pegged to oil, and look what happened to that. I mean, do you think that we're going to believe that your guys' Petro was going to be pegged to the oil too? I mean, come on. The whole point of cryptocurrencies, right, is trustlessness. That's the whole point of Bitcoin. You don't have to trust anything but Bitcoin. You don't have to trust anybody else. And I just don't see any type of nation state ever competing with a truly trustless system. Jonathan, did you have any final comments on this?
Yeah, actually, so one thing that I think the discussion is kind of moving around how nation states are treating cryptocurrencies moving forward. One thing that I think you guys are probably going to be surprised with is that since now there's a framework in Japan for these new kind of virtual currency class of assets, I think what you're going to see from Japan is you're going to see private banks, so not the central bank of Japan, but you're going to see private banks, especially the bigger ones. Like there's actually been news that one of the largest banks in Japan, Tokyo Mitsubishi UFJ, has said that they were going to create their own cryptocurrency that's pegged 1-to-1 with Japanese yen, and that's still kind of just a rumor at this point. But I have sources that say they're moving forward, trying to get this new kind of crypto asset, like a virtual currency, kind of approved and kind of whitelisted by the Japanese government, so that then we have basically. So right now, as an exchange, obviously we have the Japanese yen and all of the crypto pairs for our trading platform. But if we could say, okay, you could deposit 10,000 yen using the old bank transfers, or you could send 10,000 yen of Tokyo Mitsubishi UFJ coin, which is 1 coin to 1 JPY, and we will give you JPY balance. Or maybe we'll have it as a separate coin, and we'll allow you to trade either or on all of our JPY, trading pairs or whatnot. So I think it's not only just the countries. So like what I said before, where I don't think the Japanese government is going to create a crypto yen, but I do think that Japanese private banks are going to create coins that are 1-to-1 with the Japanese yen. I think that's going to be something that you're going to see in the next year or two moving forward in Japan, definitely.
So you're saying governments very well may likely create additional tokens that are pegged to their own fiat currencies?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, like you said at the very beginning, most fiat currency is digital anyways. It lives on bank databases. As Jonathan's account has X number of yen. There's not actually that many bills and coins in circulation. All of the balances of all of the bank accounts in all of Japan probably are 10, 20, 100 times the actual amount of physical printed money in circulation. So basically all they're doing is just taking that data and turning it from an entry in a database to an entry in a probably private blockchain that's controlled by whatever bank created it. So
very interesting. Yeah, because I definitely think that the banks are going to start creating tokens pegged to things like oil and gold and traditional commodities and such, but be interesting for them to try to save, for example, their fiat currency by pegging an additional cryptocurrency to that fiat currency. But I guess it's going to get real hairy, guys, over the next couple of years as this all plays out. It's going to get real nuts. So anybody else have any final discussion on this topic?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think it's good for us to introduce a new term that I've heard kicked around, and that's digital fiat. So instead of calling these things cryptocurrencies, if we call them digital fiat, I think it will help make the distinction. I think all the same limitations are going to apply, though, because the reason that our digital dollars are not easy to move around and they're not fungible and they're not convenient is because of all of the ways that the government wants to control and track the flow of that money. And I don't see them giving up or wanting to abandon that amount of power overnight. So if they did issue, if we had a new digital US dollar, it would feel very much like a bank transfer, right? It might be faster. There's a lot of countries where you can send money to a Bitcoin exchange within overnight or within a couple hours. In the United States, it takes a minimum of 5 days, and even then it's easily reversible. So we might be able to get some more convenience out of a government sponsored, digital fiat, but it's not going to be what you're hoping for with Bitcoin. You're never going to have actual control of your money, and that's why it's always just sort of a short-lived, stupid experiment, right?
Well, that's why it's still fiat, right? That's why it's still fiat.
Exactly. And then the only other thing I was going to say is, even if it's not fiat and you're trying to tie a coin to a physical asset, like Francis was saying, this just doesn't make sense, right? There's the Ron Paul crowd and sort of the old school Austrian economics guys that really want to see like a basket of goods, or maybe it's tied to gold or something like that. And I understand that desire. The problem is we just have to recognize that humanity doesn't have the ability to do that. We don't have any way to give you a digital asset and cryptographically prove that there's a piece of gold sitting in a vault. We didn't give up on that idea easily, but we've given up on it and we've moved on. And now we have digital assets that are valuable because they're useful, just like gold was valued because it's useful. And we can cryptographically prove that you have it and nobody can take it from you. So there's no reason for us to try to step back into sort of ancient technology there.
But the Internet of Things, JW, the Internet of Things.
Right.
We have to tie everything on a blockchain, people. Don't you understand? We have to put everything on a blockchain, because a blockchain can do everything, even like, you know, bring people back from the dead. I don't know if you guys know that. But I think we can move on to the next topic then, guys. Thanks so much for joining us so far, guys. We're having a great time. Please, if you like what you see, please hit the thumbs up button. And if you don't like what you see, hit the thumbs down button. We're here every Sunday, guys, so we're going to be here for a while. So if you don't like what you see, please, you know, we'd love to hear your comments and feedback in the YouTube comments below. And if you guys are new to the stream, please hit the subscribe button and subscribe to the World Crypto Network. We're getting close to 60,000 subscribers, so we're getting there pretty fast. And also, of course, we have our audio podcast that you can find on iTunes, where we syndicate a bunch of different great crypto podcasts in addition to our own content. So definitely, guys, got to check that out. We got a lot of great content. So let's go ahead and move on then to the next topic here. Basically, Blockstream just released a new paper called Bulletproofs, Faster Rangeproofs, wherein they detail extraordinary advances to the tune of several orders of magnitude in scaling this new privacy tech. So let me ask you, Jonathan, what I want to know from the panel, will this really improve fungibility on Bitcoin? And when can we expect to kind of see this privacy tech sort of really take off, or at least start to be used by larger companies in the space?
Yeah, as far as bulletproofs are concerned, they're extremely useful, and I think that moving forward, a lot of cryptocurrencies will try to implement them in different ways. But there was actually an article put out by Nopara the other day, which explained one of the problems with it is that currently in Bitcoin, let's say that ECDSA was broken by quantum computing. Basically, saying quote unquote the only thing to worry about is kind of a misnomer, but all you have to worry about is your private keys. Which, you know, that's a big deal, but but that's basically an individual problem. And if you're not reusing addresses, then your public key is being protected by two different hash algorithms. So you're kind of okay until we figure out a way to move away from ECDSA. But with bulletproofs, the problem is that if you can actually, reverse public keys into private keys, and the entire ECDSA and EC math is broken, then what you get is you now have the ability to generate your own new Bitcoins in the system. So it not only breaks individual private keys, but now we have to rely on ECDSA alone to protect the total amount of circulated Bitcoins, and making sure that every transaction's, input values and output values are not being, incorrectly added up, which would then mean that you could increase the amount of Bitcoins by, spending more output Bitcoins than the number of input Bitcoins that you put in, because you are able to break ECDSA. So I don't think that bulletproofs in their current form are going to be included in Bitcoin yet. I think if there was some sort of mitigation for that issue, it could be possible.
What about with Schnorr? Like, if we could get Schnorr in there, do you think that would be a much better possibility?
Yeah, well, I think Schnorr in itself would be a good addition to Bitcoin, but I'm not exactly sure. I do believe that Bulletproofs utilizes cryptography in similar ways to Schnorr in order to keep it compact. So I think you know, there could be some new way that no one has discovered yet that would mitigate some of these issues. But I do think that Schnorr on its own is a great addition to Bitcoin, and I do think that Schnorr will eventually get into Bitcoin in the near future once it's implemented. But I do have reservations on Bulletproofs as they currently are being put forth. But you know, eventually, I think if we can find mitigations for those issues, adding fungibility to Bitcoin itself is a very good idea. I think that moving forward, we do need technologies like that to kind of increase the fungibility of Bitcoin moving forward, definitely.
Yeah, so I mean, so I guess it sounds like you are optimistic on this, right? But it does sound like it's a little whiles away because we still have a lot of optimization to do. But I believe that you would agree that this is a pretty amazing improvement, because we're talking about, like, I think Trace Mayer had a great tweet where he said it's basically like a 75x improvement, which is like many orders of magnitude. So that's just amazing. So really cool. Okay, awesome. Well, we'll see what Francis says on this. Francis, what do you think about this technology? Are we going to see this anytime soon? And is this really, can this really provide can this really increase Bitcoin's fungibility to a large degree?
Bulletproofs is a pretty complicated technology, and I'm really in no position to kind of independently audit like whether or not it works and tell our viewers.
I don't think anybody here can independently audit anything. Yes, okay.
So I'm gonna have I've personally witnessed a lot of excitement by a lot of smart people that I trust around Bulletproofs, and a lot of my own kind of Bitcoin oracles are really excited about it. So I'll just reiterate their excitement and my excitement for that. One thing I'll say is that last week I tested out Bitfury's Crystal software as part of their free trial, and I was really floored. I was like traumatized for real. The software is amazing, by the way. It's actually quite powerful, and I think people can like request to have a look and see how it works. But essentially, there's like one of the tabs. There's like these two fields, and you can like select a list of like known entities. And I typed bills, and there's like 1,400 Bitcoin addresses that showed up. And it stopped in like 2016, so I changed something probably. And I typed like other exchanges, and I could see my Bitcoin transactions like that I had sent to exchanges that I thought were private, like that nobody knows about. Like it was just right there on the screen. I was like, holy crap! You know, keep saying that, you know, we need to get this privacy ticket to Bitcoin and all of that stuff. And like, you know, you can like Google, like search people's names, and they have like, it'll show up because they crawled on different websites, and everything's clustered, and there's all this data coming in. So fungibility technology is like way overdue. So I'm really hoping that stuff, like the whole, I mean, to me, it seems like everything's kind of fitting together into a scalability / privacy package with Schnorr, with Mast, with, you know, hopefully stuff like confidential transactions. But I mean, it can't come soon enough. And, you know, there's also some really interesting innovations going on with kind of other protocols. Like, you know, we really kind of have some hot fire under Bitcoin's butt from Grin and Mimblewimble. If that stuff doesn't get, you know, included in, it is getting, a lot of that technology is getting included in Grin and Mimblewimble. Even here at Galaxy, one of the things that we were doing last week was trying to port Dandelion to Mimblewimble and see how that would work out. So all of that innovation is happening there. And like my Bitcoin maximalist self is like, oh, like, you know, that's not super good, right? I don't want to see another altcoin gain any actual, you know, real use case where that stuff could be into Bitcoin. So Bitcoin's conservative development is really good. It's been really a foundational rock for the stability of the network. And you know, things move very slowly, and I think we can expect stuff like Bulletproofs or some of the alternatives that are addressing the same problems to be in Bitcoin and, you know, in a long time. I think ideally we would have liked to have some like private sidechains operational by now, and unfortunately we don't have that. So, you know, I'm not super optimistic about the timeline of getting the privacy tech in Bitcoin, and actually kind of pessimistic about how easy it's becoming to track the Bitcoin blockchain and to remove the fungibility. However, I have to say there's a lot of really cool stuff that's going on, which is like on second layers or that are other protocols that are not directly built into Bitcoin that Bitcoiners can use. I've been really fascinated by stuff like ZeroLink lately. So it's a whole framework of different privacy techniques that you can use. You know, there's a lot of new innovations. There was something called Tumblebit, but now it's already obsolete, and there's all sorts of new stuff that people can use. And hopefully these kind of second layer mixing techniques or protocols that are just really smart ways of doing transactions and broadcasting them, combined with stuff like second layer solutions like Lightning Network or private sidechains that can help ease the burden of not having the fungibility straight into Bitcoin until it's there. So yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, very good. Very good points, Francis. I think that I guess I have a couple things. You know, really, to me, I don't believe that fungibility is in Bitcoin is perhaps overdue, you know, per se. I think that we had to build this foundational transparent ledger first, and then move you know, onto more secure and private things after that, because a lot of people will disagree with that. A lot of people will say, like, you know, typically of the Monero crowd, no, it's gotta be private by default, and you know, things like that. But look, we had Monero can say that fine right now in hindsight. Look, anybody can say that right now. But look, we needed something, and Bitcoin was it. And in my opinion, I still think it was the right way to go, to make it transparent first, and then provide the privacy tech. Because again, the privacy tech that we're creating for Bitcoin, this is, sure, it's built off of 30 years of, you know, of work, but this is some bleeding edge stuff. I mean, like Mimblewimble stuff. I mean, that was like dead dropped in an IRC freaking chat room, like, and then the dude disappeared the next day. Like, I mean, all sorts of interesting innovations kind of randomly and spontaneously kind of pop up that push the whole industry forward. And this is continuing to happen from what I see. So I guess I'm really happy with, you know, with all this work on privacy and things like that. But again, you know, I think first we're doing everything in the right order. We had to build this huge decentralized transparent ledger. Now we're building the second layer tech, right, for Lightning to be able to have instant transactions. And Lightning, of course, is encrypted by default with onion routing. So that's great. But even in addition to that, like you say, additional protocols that we can mix with Lightning somehow, and you know, really start to get crazy with it. Like, and then when we combine things like, you know, Schnorr and Mast and CoinJoin and all of that, you know, in years to come from now, it's really going to, I think, build this most private and secure kind of network, hardened network of all time. And that's what's really important, is that we continue to take our time, continue to build this out, make sure nobody loses coins, make sure we don't have to fork. You know, again, this is really great to see, especially really great to see the fact that, you know, Bitcoin all these years later is still backwards compatible. Even if you don't have SegWit, you know, 10 years from now, you can have an address that never upgraded to SegWit and still send to a freaking SegWit address. And that's key. So yeah, Jonathan, did you have something else? Please.
Yeah, so I was gonna throw in my 2 cents. You know, working at an exchange, I definitely appreciate all of these new currencies, adding all of these new features. But one thing that always, you know, is very interesting to me is being an engineer and managing all of the cryptocurrency deposits and withdrawals and all of our backend and stuff like that. Is a lot of these currencies, besides Bitcoin and Litecoin and like some of the more, stable, I would say developmentally stable. I guess you could say they don't really add things much often. It's a lot. It gives me a lot more peace of mind to know that, you know, we're not doing a hard fork every month and adding some stuff, and you know, and then 2 months later, maybe all of our cold wallet would just be gone, and then, you know, we've got all of our users trading based on Bitcoins that got rolled back because some bug caused, you know, 1,000 block rollback or something like that.
Sounds like you're describing Ethereum, but sorry, go ahead.
That would be a disaster for us. So I do think that moving forward, just like you guys are saying, is that the second layer is where a lot of the innovation is going to be coming out a lot more fast, because with second layer, it's all optional. It's like, if you want to do on-chain, you can just do on-chain, And if you want to do second layer lightning, you can do second layer lightning. If you want to do channel factories, you can do channel factories. If you want to do, X, Y, Z, you can choose, you can pick and choose. But I do think that as far as the core layer, the main layer of the blockchain, we are very pleased with the way that Bitcoin Core as a project has been handling the Bitcoin blockchain, and how the main kind of protocols have been developing and moving forward. They've been doing all of this innovation on the core layer, but it's not like, oh, we created a new way to do XYZ on the core layer, so we're going to add it tomorrow. So hard fork next week, guys. They're like, here's a paper, we're going to scrutinize it, and then maybe 2 years later we'll make an implementation of it. And then with SegWit was a great idea as a hard fork, but they were like, hard fork, I don't know, you know that Drake meme where it's he's like this, and then Luke Jr. comes up with a soft fork version of SegWit, and he's like, yeah, I got this one. So I definitely think that being a lot more kind of stable on the base layer really helps us as exchanges, and also it just helps the world knowing that this ledger is not mutable, it's immutable. So it definitely helps out a lot. But yeah, I think second layer is where a lot of the innovation is going to be moving forward, and then yeah. So, and the first layer, the core layer, will kind of follow, I think, moving forward.
Yeah, it seems like, the first layer is going to be the most hardened, right? And then it's those additional layers above that you can really start experimenting and moving fast even, and kind of breaking things. Like, look, we have this thing called JavaScript on top of our web browsers. I mean, what's more unsafe than that, right? But I mean, this is where we didn't start with JavaScript, right? We started with hard network security and very, very, very vigorous and involved and protocol development that spanned decades before we got to actually starting to mess with modern technologies over the top of the browser. So yeah, I definitely feel like this is the current approach. And again, I guess it's important to mention that the core is not really so much as a project as it is a process, right? It's much more of a process, right? There's no actual central team called core, right? It is a process, and it's a nuanced view that you have to really understand. Free open source development to really understand that there's no company, there's no CEO, there's nobody making any actual centralized decision. If there's something that we want to put forth, right, as Jonathan says, write a paper and we might get to you in a couple of years. But no, I mean, but for real, there is just this type of scrutiny in the system. And so we really expect a paper first, right? We expect that to be peer reviewed, and then we expect all sorts of stuff to happen really before we start getting to actually messing with the protocol. Because again, protocol development is the most highly specialized development ever, guys. This is not a web app. This is not a social network. This is not an iPhone app. Okay. This is a protocol, and this is just very, very, very low level stuff, very, very, very highly specialized stuff. There's a reason, why things take time. So very cool, and again, I'm happy to have CryptoKitties on Ethereum and parity locking up money on Ethereum instead of Bitcoin and all that fun stuff. So, more experimentation, the better. So really great stuff. So let's hear from JW. Been sitting there for a while. We got to get your opinion in here, man. JW, what do you think about this amazing, about the discussion so far, and about this Rangeproofs, or sorry, the Bulletproofs paper that came out? Do you agree with Francis that we're kind of still a couple of years away from that kind of privacy tech? We're still kind of focused on medium of exchange right now?
No, I mean, it seems like things are moving pretty fast. These guys are definitely operating in a level that I'm not able to follow, right? Like, I can use encryption, I can do pen tests, I can do security reviews, all that sort of stuff, but I'm not that sort of a mathematician. There's very, very few people in the world that can have any idea what Greg Maxwell is working on at any point in time, right? But what I would say is, if you're worried about privacy, there's some really smart things you can do. Don't buy with an exchange where you have to KYC yourself, right? Like, we've seen these data leaks, they happen. There's no company in the world that has proven that they're any better than Equifax at keeping a big, huge, juicy database with the most sensitive information. So if you're going to buy Bitcoin and it's going to go up 100-fold over the next few years, and you want your name to be associated with that purchase and your home address, and you want that published on the internet, go for it. if not, then you really need to think about doing some stuff that might feel extreme, like buying it through cash in the mail, or doing a local Bitcoins exchange, meeting somebody in the lobby of a bank or something like that. I also wanted to just kind of emphasize that Lightning is a huge privacy improvement, and I tend to underestimate that too. Vortex, you definitely called that out, but because we've been so focused on scaling, we forget that this is a huge help. And I do think, it doesn't look like confidential transactions are ready to roll out today, but it does seem like things are moving pretty fast, but again, this sort of stuff, I think it's the hardest of anything that like humanity ever works on, right? So I'd be more comfortable trying to guess how long it'll take us to get to the moon, and I probably will have more expertise on that with rocket science than I do when it comes to this sort of low-level cryptography. ECDSA though, I mean, it's pretty secure, right? So I'm not as worried about that. I think we're going to have some nuclear missile silos that are insecure if ECDSA is broken, and we're going to have to update that on Bitcoin and in a lot of other places. That's going to be really critical if that turns out to be the case. And my final thought is Monero is to privacy as Bcash is to scaling, as Ethereum is to smart contracts. What these guys do is they take the scraps of geniuses like Greg Maxwell, they pile it up, and they do a lot of marketing and a lot of good salesmanship. But at the end of the day, the only reason that we don't already have confidential transactions in Bitcoin is it wasn't ready yet, and we needed to do the hard freaking work that takes years and years to get there. And it wasn't as much of a priority as scaling and some other stuff. If we see some transaction censorship, I think that we'll see even more rapid development happen, because we're working on the most important things when we have to do it. So I'm happy with the way things are going, and I think there's no doubt that Bitcoin is still miles ahead of anybody else. And one of the things that I always say to people is, if you're at all worried about altcoins, just ask yourself how many times an innovation in an altcoin has worked its way from that into Bitcoin versus the other way around.
Yeah, and really good points.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Francis. Go ahead.
Oh no, yeah, really good points regarding the altcoins, and regarding like privacy on Bitcoin. Bitcoin is kind of a neutral tool, and a lot of the fungibility going away is the result of people just using Bitcoin incorrectly or in really bad ways. So I think even before the second layer protocols, which obviously will provide some privacy, I think just the wallet and software layer could get a lot smarter. A lot of the things that people will ascribe to as being problems at the protocol level are really more often problems at the wallet level. And regarding fungibility, I also agree, like none of the other altcoins are truly fungible or private or work in any capacity. And I mean, if your altcoin is private and nobody uses it or can use it because it's unusable because you made terrible trade-offs in favor of some quick, easy privacy fix, then there's no use to it, right? Because what's the end goal? I mean, something's useful for privacy only if a lot of people can use it and we can use it together and it's privacy compatible. So I also agree with JW, like the altcoins are super, super far away, and I'm not worried about that. However, I don't discount the idea that there might be real, very strong demand for private transactions, and that may temporarily drive some of the resources away to an altcoin. That's just kind of the worst that can happen. These things are really easy to market, and I just don't want some creativity and energy to be devoted to something that's going nowhere. I would rather have that on Bitcoin. But I think the only last thing I would say is regarding privacy is, yeah, it's really good to have the public ledger. It's actually quite useful to have the public ledger. But what I always say is, I mean, I think Bitcoin has been marketed as being, unfortunately, as being anonymous. And it's just the fact that the blockchain is immutable, and the transactions that we do in the past are going to be there forever. So this is the main trade-off for me when it comes to speed versus security and stability. The only reason for me that there is any sort of trade-off is that I feel like we have kind of a duty towards people that are using Bitcoin right now and that think it's private, and kind of to limit the damage that can be done, for new users that don't necessarily know, and partly because we haven't provided the best software, right, for privacy, the best wallets, the best tools. We're promoting Bitcoin, so people are coming in using blockchain.info. It's kind of, I feel like it's a little bit of responsibility also to just, crank the speed up a little bit there. But, if JW is optimistic about that, I can't follow technical development enough to know how close we are. So, if the security researchers are optimistic regarding the timeline, I guess so am I.
Yeah, and it's good points. I mean, we did have more important things to worry about right now, which was the medium of exchange, right? Getting Lightning rolled out. And I like experimentation. I say this all the time. I love experimentation and everything. But look at it for what it is. It is experimentation, right? Monero is great, right? But the problem is they fork every 6 months, so you can't call it a decentralized token, right? It's still a centralized coin. And hey, they're doing great work, and that's great. But at the same time, just recognize it for what it is. They could be working on Bitcoin, but again, people get impatient. That's a big thing. Even Vitalik was impatient. There's so many coins that were just too impatient to wait for Bitcoin that they went and created their own blockchains. And, sure, they made a bunch of money, right? They made themselves rich, right? But will their platforms last the day? Will they be here 10, 20 years from now? I don't think so. And so it's really important to recognize that the main reason for all these altcoins is just people being impatient. And sure, you can have people out there like Roger saying, oh, Bitcoin didn't move fast enough, so everybody went to altcoins. But that's just not the case. It's the simple fact that everybody wants to make a buck, and everybody wants to be known for something famous, and nobody wants to wait for anything. It's just the way it is. Meanwhile, amazing work continues. Amazing, methodical, thought out work continues to happen on Bitcoin, and we see it with this amazing example of this Bulletproofs paper. So very cool. I think we can move on to the final topic, guys. Doing pretty good so far. We're going over a little bit budget on time, so we'll try to make this topic go kind of quickly. But we have over 700, and we've had about 740 viewers here this whole time. So really appreciate everybody being here. Loving everybody in the chat. Again, guys, if you couldn't join us live, please leave a comment after the video is done. But let's go ahead and move on to our final topic here. Basically, we see that the Bitcoin fees have sunk to near record lows, and now we see Bitfinex and Coinbase now supporting SegWit and batching. So that's really helping with the overall transactions. And so I got to ask, we'll go with Jonathan again first, being the special guest. Jonathan, is the high fee era of Bitcoin over, or are we going to expect these to come back?
Yeah. So you can't really tell what's going to happen in Bitcoin, 2 days ahead or a week ahead or, a month ahead. But I just to kind of add a point to the previous question, as well as continue on to this question, is a lot of people, and I don't know whether they're people or spammers or exchanges that don't have the resources or what, a lot of people really don't understand fees. And I think one of the interesting things is, like, the other day, suddenly out of nowhere, even though literally 1 Satoshi per byte was confirming in the next block, out of nowhere, like 10 megabytes worth of 100 Satoshi per byte transactions came out of nowhere. And it's like, okay, well, if you're a spammer, you would want to spam as efficiently as possible. So I don't think it's a spammer. If you were an exchange, why would you broadcast them all at once when you know that 10 megabytes worth of transactions is not going to go out all at once? Like, why wouldn't you just, put them out like a little bit at a time and do it at like maybe 50, because, it's like 1 Satoshi per byte. And I don't think people are going to start randomly, adding stuff above 50. But it's like, I think in the kind of idea of, is the era of fees going to be over? I think the answer is, it depends on how smart everyone is at using. I mean, someone could come out tomorrow and be like, you know what? Screw getting my transactions confirmed for like 10 cents. I've got like a bajillion Bitcoins. I'm just going to, make it rain, and the miners are going to get a payday. And I'm just going to put out like 20 megabytes worth of transactions at 1,000 Satoshis per byte. Well, for the next couple of hours, Bitcoin fees are going to be very high. so it's very hard to tell. But I do think that as far as transactions being produced versus transactions being mined, I think that is going to be harder and harder for people to kind of clog up, especially when companies like Coinbase, they start batching transactions and moving to SegWit. I can tell you, I can't give you specific numbers, but I do know, looking at our hot wallet and looking at our competitors' hot wallets, is that exchanges probably make up about 90 to 95% of traffic on the Bitcoin network. And it's literally just one exchange sending a Bitcoin transaction to the deposit address of a different exchange. Like literally, that's like 90 to 95%.
And just, I'd like to interrupt just real quick. I try to tell people this too, that, right now in the stage that we are, Bitcoin, the vast majority of transactions happen offline, right? On exchanges with debit cards and so on and so forth. So if we're seeing low transactions on the blockchain, for example, it's not because nobody's using it, but I just wanted to bring that point up. So please continue.
Yeah. So one thing that I think, even more so than SegWit, that will definitely bring down the number of transactions on chain, and hopefully make sure that a fee event like we saw at the end of last year won't rear its ugly head again, is Lightning. And the reason why is because I think once Lightning gets kind of down pat, all of the exchanges are going to open channels with each other, and you will have people who are trying to arbitrage will just be sending Lightning requests from one exchange to another, and all of that is going to not even touch the chain. And then for the larger, amounts, there are even, kind of privatized solutions. So like, as you mentioned before, Blockstream is killing it, not only on the open source front, but they have the new product Liquid, which we're actually, BitBank, we're signed up to implement that on our exchange. And once that's done, I mean, that's like the 100, 500, 1,000 Bitcoin transaction version of Lightning. Because right now, as Lightning is kind of in its nascent stages, there's actually a recommendation not to open a channel that's larger than 0.16 Bitcoins at this moment. Which, as the price keeps going up, that's still getting pretty big for a channel. But right now, the recommendation is not to be putting 500 Bitcoins into a channel. Which, as an exchange, we're pushing out huge amounts of Bitcoins on chain. But I definitely think, a large volume of our hot wallet outputs are definitely below 0.16 Bitcoin. So just by getting those off the chain and onto Lightning channels, I think that we will definitely see a half or 60%, 70% decrease in on-chain transactions. And once we get things like Liquid or some other product that will allow for kind of a semi-trustless method for exchanges to swap Bitcoins and other cryptocurrencies super fast on like a small privatized chain that has very fast confirmation times, I think we're going to see less and less congestion. So I think the era of fees, the era of ridiculously high fees on Bitcoin as a continuous trend like we saw at the end of last year is not going to happen for a long time.
Yep, such good points in there, Jonathan. I mean, the big part I think I want to highlight is the fact that Lightning channels aren't designed to have just huge amounts of traffic, right? Lightning nodes aren't designed to have this huge amounts of liquidity sitting in each individual node, because that's one of the fears of people who claim that Lightning Network will grow to be centralized and things like that. But that's not how it works. That's not how the hubs are designed. That's not how the incentivization structure works. I mean, really, Lightning has its own set of game theory. I mean, Bitcoin has game theory, but Lightning literally is its own layer of game theory and stuff like that on top of it. And as we evolve that and continue to scale that, of course, we'll have situations set up so that we can have more liquidity per node and things. But right now it's not, you're not incentivized, because I believe that the private keys for your node are stored online, and so you do not want to store too much liquidity in each node, and that's a big part of why it really won't be centralized. There won't be these big huge hub and spokes of like thousands of Bitcoin on one single hub that everybody's gonna have to go through. It's nothing like that. And again, I encourage everybody to please check out the graphs, check out the graphics, check out the live data right now. Don't listen to people, right? Listen to data. Go look at the data, and you will see how the Lightning Network is evolving right now, both on testnet and livenet, and it is not a hub and spoke model.
Yeah, definitely. Just to kind of interject something is for our regulators here in Japan, we have it kind of separated where all of our user assets are in cold, and basically our hot wallets we only have enough cryptocurrencies on our hot wallets that we could cover using our own funds in the case that all of our hot wallets were stolen. Similar to the way that CoinCheck the other week had a hack, and they had, I think, like $600 million in their pocket, and they were like, "Oh, we'll just give you back this money that we have in our pocket." So we don't have $600 million, unfortunately, but we are moving in a similar way where we're going to make sure that our hot wallet only contains as much as we could return in the event of a hack. So we're going to treat Lightning as a hot wallet moving forward, at least at the beginning, until there's some sort of clear way to manage Lightning nodes using cold keys. Until then, we're going to treat it as a hot wallet. So we're not going to be putting like 500 Bitcoins in channels. And if we do, we're going to close those channels and move stuff to cold storage. So that's the thing that I think is going to be happening moving forward. Also, we've been working very closely with Lightning Labs, and we have been talking about ways to implement. So right now we're implementing Lightning in our exchange so that as soon as mainnet is kind of officially like supported, we're going to support deposits and withdrawals for all of our customers using Lightning. But we're kind of talking with Lightning Labs on how we were going to change the UI and the UX to make sure that people aren't incentivized to do kind of wonky things. So like, for instance, we're not going to encourage people to directly open channels with us. It's going to be a last ditch resort in case they couldn't route anything with us. We're going to encourage that they use the Lightning app that Lightning Labs is developing. That's an open source app, which will have an autopilot feature so that when someone puts Bitcoins in there, it'll automatically open channels with high connectivity nodes. And then they will just route all of their payments to us. And in the case that they couldn't find a route for anything, then we'll have a little area where they can, it'll be like a small thing where it'll be the kind of node key that they can use to create a channel with us. So there are definitely ways that you can implement Lightning in your exchange that would encourage bad practices. And I think we're kind of talking with Lightning Labs and saying, okay, so what would be the best way, the most responsible way for exchanges and services to kind of implement these features? So I think it's a learning experience both ways, because not only are we learning a lot about the Lightning protocol, but Lightning Labs obviously has never run a Bitcoin exchange. So they don't know kind of the stuff that we have to go through as far as regulations and managing tons of funds for a bunch of other people. So I think it's great that Lightning Labs has been very open to talking with us and helping us implement Lightning in our backend. So I definitely think that the fees are going to go down, and I definitely think that in the beginning, the Lightning Network is going to be kind of kept into our hot wallet kind of area. And so we're not going to have tons and tons of channels with like hundreds of Bitcoins. We're going to try to encourage people to use the decentralized Lightning network using our UX and our UI design.
Yeah, very cool. And so many good points in there too, Jonathan. And just, these things like Lightning, right? Like these side chains, Liquid, this is going to take huge amounts of traffic off the main blockchain. This will save up so much space. This will save up so much, in fees. I really think this is going to be really great going forward. And again, Liquid, so important, guys. Remember, so many transactions are between exchanges. If they could just go on a Liquid sidechain and have their liquidity traded exchange that way, keep it off chain, then bam. I mean, that's just huge amounts, guys, of space and bandwidth, liquidity, everything. That's just huge amounts of space we can save on the Bitcoin blockchain. And again, have those fees be as low as possible. So very, very cool. Let's go to JW. JW, what are your thoughts so far on the discussion about our fees? Are fees really going to be low forever now that we're going to have these things like Lightning and sidechains? And what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, all the way back to Adam Back's Hashcash, we've been working on this problem. And the only way to really deal with spam is to make it expensive for the sender. If you're on Twitter and you're getting scams in every one of your feeds, that's because it's very, very cheap to do that. They don't have to get a whole lot of results because it's essentially free to create a Twitter account and throw that sort of stuff out. If you get a bunch of emails that are from, the Nigerian prince in your inbox, it's the same thing. It's essentially free to send those emails. They can have a very low success rate and still be very cost effective. And with Bitcoin, if the fees are really low, then it's not a big deal to sort of send a message or support another attack or just cause some general disruption. And if you can time that with a change that you're trying to get pushed through on Bitcoin, or you can time it with some buys or some sell orders or something and kind of, scare the market, it's just going to happen. It's not going to go away. I think the best thing that we have going on right now to deal with it is Lightning, because with Lightning, if you have an exchange or you have just somebody that you have a channel open with, you could have hundreds or thousands of transactions happen. And then when you need to close the channel or open a new one, it's a single transaction. So it could easily be not a big deal for an on-chain transaction to cost $100 because it's not going to cost you anything as a user per transaction. And that's incredible. So I think, we would still see the spam. We just wouldn't care about it as much if we're using Lightning. And then the other thing that I think is going to help with this a lot is that the attacks that are happening on the network and the price manipulation and all that sort of stuff, it's slowly working itself out of the system. As the market cap gets bigger, there's more holders. It's just harder to play those games. And what I'm really excited about is the fact that we're finally starting to see some real commoditization of the ASICs. The ASIC manufacturing had been, a very small number of people, arguably one or two guys, and really one that wants to sell to the public. We're seeing that change really rapidly. I think our patience with not screwing around with this stuff and letting the free market do what it does and commoditize products and just being patient with that is finally paying off. We're kind of right at the cusp of that. And I think part of the reason that we know that is that there's a rumblings of sort of the death rattle of the incumbents. But yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about all that. I'm excited that that more and more miners are hanging out with Francis up there in Canada and Norway and all these other places. And so yeah, we'll still see spam attacks. We just won't care about them as much.
Damn good points, man. So many good points. I mean, the spam, we have to have the transaction fee, at least in the beginning anyway, just to feed the miners, right? Because we're still working on fees. But we have to have the fees on there, like you say, from a security standpoint, JW, just so we can mitigate spam, so we can mitigate attacks. And so again, this is a great point from the security researcher, right? He's thinking about this adversarially. We have to have some type of barrier or buffer to make sure to mitigate attacks on the network, because this is a network, right? And we have to charge something to be on this network. We can't have it be free, or else you get things like spam, unlimited emails, right, from spam, unlimited messages on Twitter from spam, and things like that. So very, very important. This is the internet of money. This is not the internet. And then again, just great point on the mining. You guys, so much mining is coming. Maybe Francis, we're gonna go with Francis next, and you can maybe talk about this too in addition to the fees. But yeah, just a great point on so much is happening in the mining space. People are moving. There's new competitors. We got announcements from Samsung and Nvidia and all these guys. It's gonna be, we're finally, like you say, JW, our patience is finally paying off. We are seeing finally more and more people jump into the mining space. We knew that it would take a little while, guys. This is I mean, you have to spin up a fab. You have to understand the technology. This is bleeding edge stuff. Cryptocurrency is new stuff. So we knew it would take a while, and somebody could have a little bit of a monopoly like Coinbase or Bitmain for a little while, right? Until enough people come into the space, until people see that and they're like, oh, wow, I see they're making profits. I want some of those profits, because again, guys, these companies don't exist in a vacuum. So we see all sorts of people eyeing the space, specifically the miner space. So very, very cool. Thank you, JW. Let's go with Francis next. Francis, what are your thoughts so far on the conversation of these fees? I mean, are they going to remain low now forever? And what are your thoughts on the latest in mining?
So the fees have been low for the past, I think, month now, and it's definitely a welcomed kind of breather. I remember in November, December, Bills receives a lot of inputs, and sometimes when we batch transactions, we have like 200 inputs in them. Paying $100 US for one transaction can sometimes be a traumatizing event. I agree with Jonathan on many points. I agree with everybody. I always agree with everyone here, or almost. No, but I agree with Jonathan on many points. Like, it just depends on how smart we are with the transactions. If you look at the transaction fees in the mempool, for example, last week there was a spike, but it immediately just went down right away. And I have the exact same conclusion as Jonathan, in the sense that that's definitely not like a spammer, because that's really weak attempt, right? It's a super inefficient use of his funds to spam. So I'm kind of leaning towards an exchange doing a transaction that's really inefficient, or someone doing some kind of consolidation. So if you look really far in the history and charting of the mempool, what you'll see is like these huge spikes, like in the mempool, that come like every 3 or 4 months. And in between those 3 or 4 months, I'm still using Bitcoin, you're still using Bitcoin, like all the people I know are still using Bitcoin. So what that tells me is that kind of validates the claims that the exchanges and these institutions are doing a lot of the on-chain transactions. So my feeling is these big mountains that we're seeing like every 2 or 3 months, which make the fees go up, either that's spam, that's gonna hopefully go away someday magically because people won't stop spamming, but more hopefully these are just really inefficient transactions being done by exchanges. I think definitely personally, for example, the feeling of paying those $1,000 transaction fees every single day, that's a lot. I mean, shit, that's like $500,000 a year. If that would have continued, that motivated a lot of companies. I'm sure every single company was paying the same kind of fees. Everybody had the same awakening. Everybody that's in Bitcoin, that's following the news, like, shit, we really need to pump this team on Lightning Network. I mean, a lot's been said, but I think I want to say from kind of the front lines of being like a blockchain consultant, and I just want to say there's a huge market interest by a lot of companies that are using Bitcoin to just finance Lightning Network development. I mean, a lot of companies are using Bitcoin, are not like super into the community, and they're just like, why don't I have Lightning? It seems like a solution to all my problems. I want it now. And they're like, well, it's not ready now. It's like, well, how much money is it going to take? You just make it ready. So a lot of companies are actually, looking to collaborate with open source project developers directly, saying, hey guys, we love your work and we help you. Do you need some testers? Can we give you some market feedback? And that's really, that's really encouraging to me. The fees definitely will not stay this low forever. If you just look at the chart, you can expect them to be like, $10 somewhere soon, right? I mean, it just goes like this. I mean, at some point they're going to be $10 again. So you might as well open all your Lightning channels on mainnet right now with all your friends and consolidate all your funds. But I do think that over time, because it's going to be so easy to like the concept of batching applied to Bitcoin transactions also applies to the opening of channels and closing of channels. I'm seeing a lot of really awesome research in how people are going to manage like Lightning node clusters. Like Bitfury has a tool, Peach, which allows you to just like whip up a bunch of clusters, and we're building tools to manage the liquidity between different sorts of clusters. And like the way that we're modeling it, it's like, whoa, we're really not going to have to do a lot of on-chain transactions like with our users. Like it's actually, if we strategically open different channels with different other vendors, I mean, there's really not going to be that many on-chain transactions necessary. So I'm very, very bullish on that. However, I mean, inevitably, if Bitcoin continues to take off, like there's going to be demand for block space. And I'll also add that all of the other non-monetary uses of Bitcoin have kind of been taken off of Bitcoin and moved on other blockchains, which is freeing a lot of space for the monetary transactions, or they've gotten like significantly smarter. So you look at like timestamping on the Bitcoin blockchain, like if you're still using OP return right now, you're just dumb, and you shouldn't be using Bitcoin. You should be using open timestamps and aggregating all of your data into a huge Merkle tree and only timestamp the root of the tree using the open timestamps protocol. If you want to create an ERC20 token, you should definitely be looking at whipping up a sidechain with confidential assets instead of using curler coins directly into that. Some companies that I saw were just every transaction they were doing OP return transactions, just like to identify that transaction in their database. They were just using space like that, and it's going away. So I mean, as I said, like those really high transaction fees last time, combined with the price, you see $1,000 USD transaction fee. Your business is going to make decision to hire engineers to do batching, and that's really good for everyone, right? That's super good. So yeah, I think that's about it.
Yeah, it seems that these high fees have driven all sorts of stuff. They've stimulated Lightning development, or at least the awareness of Lightning. They've stimulated that, and they've stimulated, motivated companies to be aware of the fact of why they're getting a lot of high fees. Like, for example, Coinbase now, batching their transactions. So yeah, that's great, Francis. This does motivate. There's always a positive, in every negative, and especially when it comes to Bitcoin, man. Like every time people see like a negative, it's really a positive. If you actually ask somebody in the Bitcoin space, they'll be able to tell you why. So this is really interesting stuff. So thanks so much, Francis. I think we can go ahead and end the show. If anybody has any other things to say on this topic before we end it. No?
Oh, well, maybe just really quickly talk about what JW said about the proof of work and the Bitcoin mining space. So I'm really bullish on Bitcoin mining decentralization, and I think the free market just takes some time to adjust. You can't expect the emergent forces of the world to whip up and produce the optimal outcome like super fast. Right now, what we're seeing is, of course, Bitmain still has a lot of the attention because it sells at retail, right? And like it does sell a lot of miners. The last estimates that some guy I know whipped up was like they're selling like 300,000 S9s per month. But there are a lot of other companies that are also huge influential players in the mining space, which are getting bigger and better. If you look at like Canada right now, of course, there's some Bitmain hardware, like a lot of Bitmain hardware coming here, but there's hardware from all the other manufacturers that are, in my personal opinion, I'm looking at a lot of Bitfury hardware being deployed in Canada. There was a huge announcement by a company called Bitfury, a company called Hut8 and Bitfury, to launch all these mines in Canada, and they're definitely legitimately mining tens and tens of megawatts worth of Bitcoins. There's all sorts of other companies that are coming here and are not using Bitmain hardware. I remember having the discussion on proof of work change at Breaking Bitcoin, and the developer of LibBitcoin, I think his name is Eric. He was really, proof of work works. SHA-256 works. There's nothing wrong with that. And if we're coming in there and intervening, hoping for a better outcome, that's not what you should be doing. You should be doing what BTC Drac done instead of what Cobra is doing online and complaining about the proof of work. BTC Drac launched a Bitcoin manufacturing company. He raised money. He raised capital. He built a website. He did some sales. I still don't know if he's going to deliver or not, but if he does deliver, this is what we should be following. I met a group of young entrepreneurs that are building a miner. I can't disclose so many details, but the miner, they have some prototypes. It's doing great. People just see there's a huge hunger for miners, generally speaking, like for the hardware. The market is massive. And there's also a huge hunger for diversification, because if you're going to invest, if you're going to raise money for a mining company, you present your business plan, and everybody has the same business plan where it's like, okay, so here's how we're going to make sure we get enough miners from Bitmain. So Bitmain is like this roadblock on everybody's business plan, and every investor in a mining company is going to say, well, what's the relationship with Bitmain? What happens if Bitmain doesn't send the hardware or can't deliver the hardware? So everybody wants some diversification. That's why, a lot of big miners, they're willing to take risks and buy new batches from new companies and not S9s, like Halong, for example. Like buying Halongs instead of S9s was a terrible financial decision for any miner right now. Although, you know, at the time the price of Bitcoin was high and the price of the Halong machine was low. But I mean, anybody that bought Halong at that time doesn't have Halongs now and would have had S9s now. But a lot of companies nevertheless did, because they knew, okay, if we can make this into a reliable source for the next year or two, that we can have more, you know, a diversified stream of miners, it's still worth the risk to like encourage a company to produce their first batch. If also that allows us to have, you know, grandfather the right to buy it on the next batch and the next batch. So I'm seeing all sorts of, you know, business plans and all sorts of people doing insane things, and you know, everybody's looking at manufacturing of the miner now. Like that's the last, I mean, that's the last step. You know, everybody wants to manufacture the miner right now, and all these deals are happening, and it's just super exciting. So I'm really happy that the discussion of proof of work didn't take off at all. You know, nobody, the proof of work discussion is a moot point. I don't want to spend too much time on that, because I don't think we should seriously consider it. And I think it's kind of like, you know, if we start talking about that, we become kind of like strawman arguments ourselves. Yeah. So yeah, that's about it for the mining. I'm super, and you know, there is such a thing as, you know, the laws of thermodynamics, which will really kick into the production of ASIC chips one day. There is also such a thing as, you know, just the absence of barrier to entry and market forces and arbitrage. So, you know, this is a really long-term game. And if you really think about it, you know, the Bitcoin companies that have failed the most historically are mining companies. Like, you've had huge giants that come and go like it's nothing, you know. Mining companies are really not really resistant to black swans, especially if you have a mining company which is really vertically integrated. And you know, you become kind of more susceptible to these market shifts. So if you're a big player now, it really doesn't mean that you're going to remain a big player forever. And I don't think that there's anything we should add other than on our entrepreneurial spirit to make this happen. And by that, I mean changing the proof of work or any kind of thing like that.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, the diversification that people want. I mean, think about this. I mean, you're a company. You want to go. You want to rely on miners. You don't want to rely on just one company. You know, and so that's a huge incentivization. And again, we don't change the entire freaking proof of work Bitcoin protocol for one company. Like that's the opposite of decentralization, right? We don't want to do that. And again, like the great point you made, Francis, you know, BTC Drac went out and raised capital, went out, started this company, made these miners, right? And Cobra just like wrote a Medium post with no code, right? So I mean, this is you can see the huge differences here. And again, this is like, I'm pretty glad, as you are, Francis, that this discussion didn't really take off with the proof of work change, and I don't think it will. So I think, Jonathan, I think you had something to say.
Yeah, and just another point, just
okay,
like, if you want, just like, even if you want like mining decentralization, like if you change the proof of work, and I tweeted about this, it's just going to centralize the manufacturing much more. Okay, look how long it took for us to get to like 5, 6, and a lot more actually that are popping up, like ASIC manufacturers that are like legitimately competing. It took a really long time, and like S9s produced like 2 years ago are still being operated today. So it took a while to catch up to Bitmain's like incredible competitive advantage, because they had the first mover advantage, they raised a lot of capital, and they got there. And it took some time for the market to catch up. Like, say that we changed the proof of work, it's just going to happen again, and there's just going to be another Bitmain or another company which develops the first ASIC or the first whatever new iteration of hardware which made this more profitable to mine. And absolutely, if there is value, I mean, people will make ASICs, right? If it's like, there's no such thing of ASIC resistance. That's just, ASIC resistance is just a scale of difficulty and how much you value being a miner of that thing. So, I mean, it's definitely going to happen again and again and again. And then you can have some really weird rotation of random proof of works being spread. I mean, it's just, to me, the best way to get mining decentralization is just to, if you want to do something other than investing in a Bitcoin company, well, I mean, just do nothing. Just let the free market work. Like that's it.
Yep, and it's true, and there's a little bit of discussion about this out there, guys. I recommend Block Digest as a podcast. JW had some conversation there with they have an Under the Microscope series where they investigate certain ideas in the community, and they had a great one about Monero, and now they've got one on the proof of work chain. So I encourage you guys to check that out. I don't want to spend again too much time on that. We're already over budget, but I believe Jonathan, you had something to say.
Yeah, so definitely in Japan, I can't talk about specific names, but obviously there's a lot of big players in Japan that are looking to produce miners, to sell miners. I think it was like GMO or some really big company in Japan that was saying that they were going to produce chips that were not 7 nanometers, which is insane. And not only that. Not only producers, but there's also a lot of interest in buying a ton of miners, buying a factory or like an abandoned warehouse in Northern Europe or in Canada and just running a mining facility. So a lot of Japanese companies have been, talking about, okay, we don't want to produce them, we don't want to sell them, but we want to buy a ton of them and mine a ton of Bitcoins in Northern Europe. So it's like, I definitely think that mining is going to be a lot more decentralized moving forward. And one of the things that I think is a problem with any sort of new proof of work algorithm that might come out down the line is, obviously it's an arms race. And right now, Bitmain is leading the arms race. And if you want to go tinfoil hatty, maybe the Chinese government has compromised Bitmain. Who knows? I don't know. We can't say anything. But I can tell you one thing is that if we create a new, sorry, that's my son. If we create a new proof of work and everyone's on a level playing field and someone shoots the gun and goes, okay, 3, 2, 1, go. Who's going to win the foot race? Probably the American government. So, so right now, I think our best bet is just keeping the proof of work algorithm as is and trying to mitigate any sort of attacks or things that we perceive as attacks by using the protocol and creating other ways to mitigate the attacks. Earlier, someone was talking about batching transactions and the end of last year. Just as I can't give you exact numbers, but we actually have charts that look at our KPIs for the amount of fees we're paying on hot withdrawals and all that stuff. And we got to the point where we were losing a ton of money on Bitcoin network fees in the middle of December. And what we did was we took our batching and we had it batching at 1 minute intervals where we would send out a transaction every 1 minute. We set that to 10 minutes so that we would just batch every 10 minutes instead. And instantaneously, our fees dropped, our fees per withdrawal, which is one of the KPIs that we do. Obviously, if you batch a lot more, then there's a lot more withdrawals in one transaction, which means that, per byte, we're having less bytes per withdrawal. Which means less fees per withdrawal. So we're eventually looking at maybe kind of moving that back. But right now we're doing very well with 10 minutes, and that's keeping fees down a lot for us. And so definitely, like I was saying, is one of the resources that I think is one of the main problems with a lot of these problems in the Bitcoin network is that we have a huge shortage of engineers that understand Bitcoin and that understand the fee market and that understand how transactions work and how batching works. So I think the CEO of Coinbase the other day, when people were pressing him on the issue of SegWit, he said something like, "We don't have enough resources," and I totally believe that. I understand that they're a huge company and they have a ton of money, but a lot of companies have a ton of money. CoinCheck had a ton of money, as evidenced by they pulled out 600 million from their pocket and said, "We're going to give it back, guys." They didn't have the engineering, know-how to say, okay, let's not put $600 million on a hot wallet. So, I mean, I love the guys at CoinCheck. A lot of them are really good friends of mine, but it's just there's not enough resources, and there's a ton of interest. There's a ton of users coming in, and it's really hard to manage everything. So I think one of the big issues moving forward, and I think Jimmy Song and myself, we had a discussion during Scaling Bitcoin, is education. Educating engineers moving forward is going to be a big issue in the Bitcoin and in the cryptocurrency space. So I would definitely encourage people to, if there's some sort of education initiative in your neck of the woods, volunteer, maybe donate. But like I said, a lot of our problems cannot be solved by money. Donating time is a much better resource, especially if you know stuff about protocol development. Please donate time creating educational resources, create a blog post, create something so that people can learn and then use that knowledge to better the Bitcoin network. So that was the one thing that I really wanted to point out today. So thanks for having me, and I'm definitely looking forward to more discussions on this topic moving forward.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jonathan. We really appreciate it, man. We just got to hear one final comment from JW here before we go. So JW, please.
Yeah, man. My final thought on this is just a lot of these problems require a pretty decent grasp of economics, and economics is not hard to understand. Everybody in the field of economics has done a lot of work to intimidate people from getting interested in it and learning about it. It doesn't require math. It just requires basic logic. Everybody has that. So pick up a book by Murray Rothbard and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's very eye-opening. And to apply this to this conversation, one of the truths about economics is that if you want to attract enough competition to a specific product to make it become a commodity where it's cheap and it's easily available, what you need is sustained, reliable profits. Because entrepreneurs are looking at, hey, do I want to get into this space? And they're trying to decide how much they can invest and how long they can do that before they get a return. So good job, Bitcoin. We're coming over the edge, and yeah, read some Rothbard.
Definitely, guys, check that out. As he says, education, guys. Remember, there's so much data out there. Remember, Bitcoin is a public blockchain, so there is huge amounts of actual data and charts and things you can go through to look at this stuff, to learn this stuff about the fee market, about how everything works, right? About the core process. So there's a lot of good stuff out there, guys. Check that out, and we hope that you guys had a great time today. So we really appreciate everybody joining. We had about 750 people there throughout the entire time. A lot of people in the chat, almost everybody in the chat. We had Tone Bays in the chat, Mad Bitcoin's in the chat. I think even Richard Hart stopped by. So we had a bunch of people in there. So thanks, guys, thanks so much, guys, for everybody for joining. Let's say before we exit, let's go ahead and get everybody's information. Francis, please tell us where we can find out more information about you.
You can follow me on Twitter at @FrancisPouliot_, or check out my website, catalaxy.com, CATALLAXY. And or bills.com, BYLLS.com. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. JW, where can we find out more about you, sir?
So you can hit me up on Twitter at WeathermanIM, or my website, jwweatherman.com.
And of course, btcthreats.com. You guys, check that out. Very cool stuff. Yeah. All right. And then finally, Mr. Jonathan, thank you so much, man, for lending your time. Thank you so much for joining us this early in the morning over there. Yeah. And really appreciate it, man. Where can we find out more about you?
Yeah. So I actually don't do a lot of social media in English. I do a little bit in Japanese, but most of my English related work is done on GitHub. So you can find me on GitHub at JUnderW, JUNDERW. So Jonathan Underwood is J Underwoo. So yeah, I'll go ahead.
Too many JWs on this podcast, people.
Yeah, I know. So you can find me on GitHub, and also yeah. So I do I occasionally write articles on btcnews.jp, which is a fully Japanese news website, which I don't really write in English. So it's kind of hard, but yeah, definitely, if you guys speak Japanese or are learning Japanese and you want to read some of my articles, definitely check out btcnews.jp. Yeah, that's it for me.
Awesome, guys. Well, thank you so much, guys, for joining us. Of course, we will be here next week. We're leading into the Tone Vase show. Tone Vase has some market analysis that he'd like to cover, and we're actually pretty over. We're actually pretty over a little bit. So we were only supposed to do about an hour, but we almost went 2 hours. So we hope you guys bear with us there. We have a lot of good talk in there, a lot of great information. There was only a few of us, but we got a lot of information out there. So we hope you guys enjoyed it. We hope you guys learned something, and we really appreciate you guys being here. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. We hope to see you guys again next Sunday. We will, of course, be here next Sunday, as we always are, at 12 p.m. Pacific, talking Bitcoin. So again, guys, thanks so much for joining. Until next time, keep talking Bitcoin. We'll see you guys later.